Greetings and bienvenue, Midnight Crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast, and welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
I've been digging into the Mount Shasta disappearances for months now, and I think I've finally connected something no one else is talking about. You've all heard the usual stuff: Lemurians, Hollow Earth, alien bases. But it goes way deeper than that. There are monsters in that mountain. Not cryptids, not spirits. Actual living things that shouldn't exist. The native stories talk about sky beings and earth children who retreated underground when man grew violent. But the modern reports line up almost perfectly with those legends. Every few years, someone goes missing near Panther Meadow or Castle Lake. Their bodies are never found, but their clothes are. Always the same pattern: shredded shoes, a torn backpack, or in one case, a striped sweater. That last one is the one that got me. In 1997, a boy from Dunsmuir went missing during a family camping trip. Search and rescue found nothing except a red and yellow striped sweater, halfway buried in the snow line. The locals said it looked like it had been melted into the ice, like something radiated heat where he disappeared. Officially, they blamed exposure. Unofficially, one of the rangers quit a week later and refused to talk about what he saw. There's an older legend around Shasta that the mountain is hollow, yes, but that its heart is a labyrinth of living light. The tribes called it the place where souls fall. People say if you go deep enough into one of the old lava tubes, gravity starts to change direction. You walk down and it feels like falling, except you never hit bottom. Now, here's where it gets weird. Multiple hikers have reported seeing a goat-headed figure near the tree line before storms hit. Not like a man in a costume. People describe it as childlike in posture, but with white fur, a long face, and faintly glowing eyes. One woman said it looked sad. Another said it waved before vanishing into mist. Locals have started calling it the Goat Prince, or the Child of the Mountain. Some say it guards the boundary. Some say it lures people in. The old-timers in Weed and McLeod say if you find a field of strange white flowers up there, turn back immediately. That's where the ground gets thin. That's where you fall through. If any of you plan on hiking near Shasta, stay away from Bunny Flat and the upper ice caves. The compasses stop working up there, and sometimes the wind sounds like it's speaking. And if you ever see a goat-like child watching you from the snow, run.
Native land is often absolutely full of paranormal stuff. Spend enough time on a res or the land around it, especially when the sun goes down, and you will likely experience some weird stuff. Paranormal stuff is based on belief and faith, and there are a lot of spooks left over from ye olde native times in the US that are still out there. Hell, a lot of the natives around where I am still have these beliefs, and pass it on generationally. I live in the Pacific Northwest, and let me tell you, man, there are spooks in about every major forested area out here.
I figured this one out a few months ago. I moved to Eastern Oregon, a few miles from a reservation. I had an unusual night where I couldn't sleep because of this weird air hunger thing. This caused me to become irate, like ragey and everything, from what was basically sleep deprivation torture. My girlfriend was with me and trying to get me to calm down. I wasn't mad at her. It was this anger in reaction to the sleep deprivation. I felt this crushing, uncharacteristic negativity wash over me. I was standing in front of the kitchen sink and the window over it. The window was open. It was the summer, and maybe 3 or 3:30 or so. I heard something in the distance. Think the sound of "If a Horse Could Roar," or think about what the Jersey Devil might sound like. And it was that. The inflection of the sound was that it would quickly build to a sharp peak, then stop abruptly, kind of like the inflection of a donkey. But it wasn't a donkey. It wasn't a horse. It wasn't a cow. It wasn't a wolf. It wasn't a coyote. I heard this a couple of times, thinking that I was hearing shit. I noticed my girlfriend's expression changed, and I asked, "Wait, you hear that too?" We both heard it distinctly. I kept trying to sneak outside to hear it better, but whenever I'd open the door, it would cease. I'd close the door, then we'd hear it through the window again. I have no idea how far away it was. as we're on top of a gradually sloping hill, with pretty much nothing to obstruct the travel of sound. Oddly enough, this snapped me out of whatever I was feeling, and once chilling out, we both got to bed. I haven't heard anything like it since, and I've been hoping to hear it again, just to get a better listen. I haven't had the chance to speak to any of the Indians here, but I'm curious if they might know what this could be. I know this area is a hot spot for cattle mutilations. My own best guess is this was some sort of demon trying to lure me outside.
You open the door, it's in your home now, Anon. Never open the door, it's an invitation. Ghost 101.
Carl Landers, 69 years old, 1999, Mount Shasta, California. Old dude in good shape, he runs with bros. Wants to climb the tallest mountain in California, he and bros set out. Mount Shasta is a very busy area for hiking. There can be upwards of a dozen hikers on the trail at a time. Hikers make it to a camp halfway up, common for people to stop and spend the night. Carl was taking some meds to help with the altitude. He got sick on the way. They all slept in a 3-person tent. Poor Carl had diarrhea a few times. In the AM winds were up to 70 mph. They stayed in their tent, which was in a well-protected area near some rocks, until the wind died down. They made the choice to continue up a quarter mile to Lake Helen. They figured they would not make it all the way to the peak, but wanted to keep going and see what the weather would do. The guys pack up the tent. Carl looks cold and kind of stares into nowhere. His buddies tell him to go ahead of them and keep warm, and they will catch up. The lake is only a quarter of a mile around the corner of the mountain and a few hundred feet. Less than 30 minutes later, they were on their way, just a little behind Carl. Halfway to the lake, Milt told Barry, these are the 2 other dudes, that he was not feeling good. He was going to descend and meet them all at the car. When Barry got to the lake, there were more than 20 campsites. He spotted a park ranger and asked if he had seen anyone. The ranger said only one guy came through and went up to the casual trail. Milt followed and got within 100 feet of the other climber, but went back because the guy was moving way too fast to beat Carl. Milt goes back down to the lake and asks the ranger again about Carl, but the ranger had not seen anyone else. Milt goes back down to the other campsite, hoping to find him there. No Carl. Milt reports his friend missing, and the search begins the next morning. No crevasses or places along the trail for Carl to hide. He seems to have just disappeared. Helicopters search the mountain and take expert climbers and searchers to the summit to descend the mountain looking for Carl. They find nothing. There were between 50 and 100 people on that mountain trail, and no one saw Carl. The area above the disappearance was covered in snow. Any evidence would have been easily spotted. The area below was relentlessly searched in a grid pattern. Canines found no scent, and not a single piece of his clothing or equipment was ever found. People say the mountain just opened and swallowed him up.
Some guy is mad at him, follows him to a spot where they're alone. Chloroform.gif somehow transports him off the mountain. The last bit is a bit tricky, though, considering there are probably no cars on this mountain and a helicopter would have been noticed.
Bet last spring-summer was like 11 at night. Be in North California, Shasta County. Me and my friend were walking around my back lot in hiking gear and shooting the shit. Be walking the fence line and look across the neighbor's field. I see a bright orange light to the north. "Dude, look," I say, pointing at the orb. My friend looks, and after a little bit of the usual "I do not see it" BS, he sees it. "That is Venus," he says. We keep walking along the fence, and I look back at the light. That shit is moving westward. I point it out to a friend, and he tries to convince me it is not moving. After a minute of arguing, he admits it is moving. The orb is moving west and stopping and moves east and back west. It keeps moving back and forth, taking like 8 to 10 minutes to complete its path. "It is a high-flying helicopter," he says. "That is not a fucking helicopter." We keep watching it. After a half hour, we get bored and walk to the other side of the lot. It is like an hour after we first saw the light and it is still there. We are leaning on one of the rusting cars back there and watching the light, debating over why some asshole would be moving east and west over and over again for an hour in a helicopter. If it is even a helicopter, the light stops in the center of its path. I do not know how long it stopped because I was looking at something else for a bit. I think I was trying to find something. The light is stopped, like dead stopped. A smaller orb shoots out the bottom and another one. There are now 3 small orbs below the first. We are pretty spooked at this point. The orbs shoot off into different directions. One goes east, one west, one passes right over us. The little light stops over the neighbor's field, or us, I do not know. It kinda just stays there for a bit. We kinda just stay quiet, do not move. I do not think I could have. The small orb goes on its merry way. The big orb fades away. Does a high-flying helicopter do that? I said. That is kinda sketchy, he replies. We go inside wide-eyed and terrified. I have nightmares about grays outside my house, looking into the sliding glass doors. I do not move at all. I wake up in the morning and make breakfast. I talk with friend about the light, tell my brother that was in the house the story. My brother wishes he was there. My friend and I paused. We changed the subject. For most of the summer, I slept with my Winchester by my bed because I thought I may have been abducted. The nightmares stay constant. They stop around July and everything goes back to normal.
The year was 1995, early to mid-March. Be me, a little kid, 6 going on 7, immigrant from Mexico. My dad is driving an RV converted from an old school bus. We were taking the long road, making stops every other day to rest and enjoy the scenery. At around day 5, we park on the side of the freeway for the night. We were nearing Mount Shasta, and we had heard reports that it was snowing, so we wanted to rest and travel during the day, so it would be safer. In the morning of the 6th day, my siblings and I got up as usual and went out to explore our surroundings before we left to continue our trip up to the north. Our destination was Tacoma, Washington. We went out, explored like we had been doing the last few days during the trip. We ate, said our prayer asking for protection during our crossing through Shasta, and took off. Just so y'all know, it was snowing that day, a lot, and the RV's windshield wipers were not working. But that is another fun story. Right as we took off, I went to the back of the RV, for some unknown reason, and looked through the back window. ¿Qué es eso? What the fuck is that? I see it tall. For a kid, as I got older, I sized it up to around my height, give or take a few inches. I am 5'8". Red creature, walking up right across the road, toward the other side, which is a cliff wall, not a drop. As it was halfway across, it turned towards my direction and looked right at me. I ran to the front and called my siblings so they could see the creature. I pulled out some school books trying to show them a baboon, to give them an idea of the color of its fur. But none of my books had any pictures that I could use, not even of a monkey. Close to a decade later, when I was 16, I went to Mexico with my dad. He does missionary work there. When we were traveling how the conversation came across his supernatural experiences. He has had a lot of crazy experiences with the supernatural in the US, Mexico, and Haiti. I brought up my experience of the red creature. It was not until I was 17 that I heard of the skunk ape. Then, he said, years ago, when he was still young in his ministry, before I was born, he was traveling in a car with some brothers in Mexico's rural, less populated areas, I do not even know if that is the right word, regions at night. Then, all of the sudden, I know, a red creature ran in front of his car. I cannot remember if it was hit or if my dad managed to stop. The creature turned toward the front of the car and slammed his hands on the hood and looked at my dad, eye to eye. Then I took off running. I asked my dad to describe the creature. Red, hairy, had a tail. I asked him the creature's height. he told me. He was around your height. Well, that reaffirmed to me that something weird was going on. I should note, I didn't hear about Bigfoot till I was in my close to my teen, way after I had arrived in the U.S.
My family has a cabin there and I spent tons of summers there. I was always told by grandparents to never cross the tree line and could never get an answer as to why. Just don't. Go for an afternoon hike or squirrel hunt with my cousin. We find a few to shoot but miss. We find more targets. We still miss even though it was close range. We are good hunters but do not think much of both of us missing multiple forest rats. The targets keep showing up but we cannot hit shit. We are getting frustrated. We keep following the targets. My cousin points out that we are following them uphill. We are nearing the tree line but in full pursuit because the squirrels are pissing us off. We cross the tree line in pursuit and chase the targets for about 5 minutes. The cloud cover goes from 50-50 to almost full cover. It feels like a storm is coming. The targets disappear. We hear what sounds like an enormous thing rolling through the woods and making crushing noises. The sound is not coming from the woods, though. It is coming from the mountaintop. Instinct says, seek woods for cover. The sound can only be produced from woods being destroyed. Both of us are getting really confused. We are almost in a trance-like state. We give in to instinct and run to the woods. We get to the tree line and the sound disappears. We kept running downhill till exhausted. We jogged the rest of the way. When we got back to the cabin, my grandpa was on the porch smoking. He said we looked pretty sweaty for hunting squirrels, especially since we were empty-handed. I knew he had an idea that something happened, but we didn't want to talk about it. Years later, we told him about our experience and he knew all about it. Apparently it happened to him while deer hunting. He wasn't sure what was baiting hunters beyond the tree line, but said if they can control animals, we're not far behind.
A 3-year-old boy, John Doe, disappears from his parents in Mount Shasta, along a creek river where people go fly fishing on October 1st, 2010 at 6:30 p.m. Parents contact the sheriff. A search starts. They don't find him. They find him 5 hours later at 11:30 p.m. at night sitting in a thicket. He doesn't say anything. He is taken home. He is in a state of stunned disbelief. They talk to him and ask him what happened the next morning. He tells a story that he is taken into a cave that he thinks is underground. He says he knows it is dark outside, but when in the cave I could see the entrance and it's light outside. He said he is with a woman who looks like his grandmother, and he thought it was his grandmother. In the cave, he saw other things in the cave that look like people, but they are robots that aren't moving. After a while, he figures out the woman isn't his grandmother, even though she is nice and polite with him. He concludes she's a robot. He said there was some unusual light coming from her head. She started to get pushy, took out some sticky paper and put it on the ground, and asked him to defecate onto it. He said he didn't have to go and she got mad. He said he saw small guns and things around the perimeter of the cave, and they had dust on them. The boy spent time with the grandmother the following weekend and told her the story. The grandmother then tells journalists that 3 weeks before the boy disappeared, she and her husband were at the same creek where he went missing, spending the night. They woke in the middle of the night because the grandmother felt a pain at the base of her neck. Her husband looked at it, and there was a small bloody spot at the base of the neck. She didn't know if this was related to the boy's disappearance, but found it strange.
I probably shouldn't be sharing this, but what the hell? This may sound like bullshit, but all the dream details are how they actually happened, as far as my memory permits. I had a dream about an unidentified mountain. Upon later learning of the supposed base and seeing the pictures of the outside, it looked like Shasta, a lone, snow-capped mountain. I go inside through a cave opening. There was a train taking people on tours and leading them to a destination. It really just smashed them into a wall. Or were they exiting this dimension? I see a lot of living apartments and levels. The higher up levels are smaller. It is a mountain, of course. The level seems to denote rank and class. There are some alienish beings on some levels, though most look human. I start flying through the place. I go through the ceiling of one level and to the floor of another, with a little resistance each time. People on the higher levels start noticing my actions as abnormal, and I almost feel I am booted out of the mountain like being booted from a chat room to which I was not supposed to be privy. The weirdest thing I remember is how I entered the space of the mountain grounds. I was in an apartment or condo with my sister, and I jumped through a window. This is how some people astral project and jump between densities or planes. From what I could tell, the apartment was in Los Angeles. That was the impression I got, at least. I was instantly at the mountain on the other side of the window. This dream was a long time ago, so the details are sketchy. I knew of Mount Shasta at the time of the dream, but I did not know what it looked like or that it supposedly housed alien races. I listened to a C2C interview on YouTube years later, and it matched what I saw in the dream. I would have been freaked out if I didn't already know you could do this kind of stuff in dreams.
Another theory might indicate some subterranean force that is involved in the abductions. For example, Mount Shasta is one of the largest clusters and has always been known as a holy mountain by the Native Americans and even in modern times. Also, there are numerous UFO reports coming from Mount Shasta, as well as UFOs ascending from the peak, etc., which is also alleged to have a subterranean base located underneath. Since this mountain has always been claimed as holy, it might not at all be a surprise that there are actually forces present there that have been there for a very, very long time. Also, it wouldn't be the first holy mountain or alleged subterranean base.
Your thread freaked me out. I think I saw the thing you're talking about. It was about 3 years ago, late fall. My cousin and I were hiking near McBride Springs, right before dusk. There was this weird stillness in the air, like the whole forest was holding its breath. We stopped to rest, and that's when I noticed something white moving uphill through the trees. I thought it was a mountain goat at first, but it stood upright, small, like maybe the size of a kid. It didn't look threatening. It just stood there, half hidden behind a rock, staring at us. Its eyes had this dull glow, not bright like an animal's reflection, more like candlelight seen through fog. My cousin tried to talk to it. "Hey, you okay?" And the thing tilted its head. Then it smiled. I swear to God, it smiled like it understood what he said. Then the air changed. I don't know how to explain it. It got heavy, almost syrupy, and there was this low hum under the ground. My cousin started to panic and grabbed my arm, telling me we needed to go. When we turned back toward the trail, there were flowers where there hadn't been any before. White ones growing out of solid rock. We ran. When we looked back, it was gone. The next day, we went back with a ranger. The flowers were still there, but the area looked wrong. The ranger told us people sometimes hallucinate at that altitude and made us leave. I didn't tell anyone else because I figured we just freaked ourselves out. But reading your post and seeing you mention the flowers, the falling, and the striped sweater, yeah, I think that thing's real.
The north side of Mount Shasta has been inhabited since at least 600 BC, possibly 2500 BC. Artifacts in the greater area suggest 9,000 years of Native American habitation. Mount Shasta was a corner territorial boundary for 4 Native American peoples, the Shasta, Modoc, Atsuwegi, and Wintu, and within the view of the Karuk tribe on the Mid-Klamath River and the Klamath tribe of the Upper Klamath River. For all these native peoples, Mount Shasta was the center of creation. The Shasta people believed that the Great Spirit first created the mountain by pushing down ice and snow through a hole from heaven, then using the mountain to step onto the earth. He created trees and called upon the sun to melt snow to provide rivers and streams. He breathed on the leaves of the trees and created birds to nest in their branches. He broke up small twigs and cast them into streams, where they became fish. Branches cast into the forest became animals. The nearby Modoc people shared this creation account and taught that the Great Spirit lived on Mount Shasta after creation. His daughter fell from the mountain and was raised by grizzly bears. She married one of their clan, and their children were the first humans. In punishment, The Great Spirit condemned the bear to walk on 4 legs and scattered their children all over the world.
Some viewers may find the following video disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised.
Trinity Mountain Underground Complex. Jonathan Sweet, CIA Monarch mind control victim. He told me that we were going to a place called The Mountain. This was a top-secret government facility out in the mountains of Northern California. He told me that we were going to a place called the Trinity Mountain Underground Complex. He said that there in front of us was one of the entrances to this facility. He told me that the Trinity Mountain Underground Complex was a top-secret facility that no one is supposed to know about. Controversial things occur at this site that the people simply would not understand. He told me that I would be acting as a guard for a ceremony that was to be taking place there that night in one of the secret chambers under the earth. The mountain itself was a very dangerous place where one did not want to be caught unarmed. He told me that there were dark and evil things in the mountain, and he said that I would need to be very quiet and very cautious and careful in my time there. I can remember him telling me about a group of beings that lived there in the mountain, an ancient group that lived within the mountain, which I do not entirely understand but was very evil in nature. He told me that people had disappeared in the mountain, as this group would at times take people away never to be seen again. The air was thick with moisture, and there was a strong smell of chlorine coming from the doors leading to the ceremony, which began sometime shortly after I was placed at my post. The corridor was quiet, except for the sounds coming from behind the door leading to the ceremony. From behind the doors, I began to hear water splashing, men's voices, women screaming as though in pain, and other indescribable sounds coming from within. I was in a disassociated state and was still under a deep spell of mind control. I stood for an unknown length of time at this location, listening to the sounds behind the door and taking in these surroundings. The radios had been quiet for the most part, with only the commanding officer checking in on each guard periodically throughout the night. Then something happened, and this pattern began to be disrupted by some irregular chatter over the comms that was not typical. One of the other members of the security detail, who was directly across from me on the other side of the event, had taken the liberty of looking behind the steel doors he was posted at to see what was taking place in the ceremony. When he had seen what was happening in the ceremony, he called in over the comms to all the other guards in the security detail, and he told the U.S. that the people in the ceremony were eating people alive. I listened to my headset but was silent on my radio as the guard described what was happening in the ceremony. The guard who had looked behind the doors did not approve of the activity taking place in the ceremony, and he told all of the other guards posted around it to join him in stopping the ceremony and killing everyone in the room. He had said that none of the people in the ceremony deserved to live, and we needed to kill them all. The smell of chlorine and blood was strong as I opened the door to the ceremony, and the aroma and taint of the air hit my senses like a wall of moisture and blood. I took no time to stop and look at what was taking place around me, but my eyes, ears, and nose could not help but take in the surroundings and the things that were taking place there in that room at that moment in time. When I entered the room, I was hit by a wave of sound such as one would experience when entering a large and very crowded public swimming pool area, with the sound of water splashing, people talking and laughing, and the echo of the enclosed space and activity. But in this environment, people were also screaming, yelling, and crying out in pain and horror. The room was a giant swimming pool area with several pools spread throughout the room of all sizes. There was large pools to my right as I entered, where much of the activity was taking place, and there were some smaller, shallower pools to my left. There was blood everywhere in the water and on the surfaces in between the pools. I looked across the room and I could see the doors that I needed to access, and I ran across the room to the other side. There were men in the pools to my left, and I looked down at them as I passed, and I could see what it was that they were doing. They were naked, and they were all in the pool together and were eating the body. It was difficult to process in my mind as I passed by them, and they looked up at me from their activity, caught by surprise that someone was moving through the ceremony. I was very relieved to make it to the steel doors at the opposite side of the room, and I quickly opened them and stepped out of the ceremony and closed the door behind myself, leaving the blood and murder behind me for the moment. All of this pushed me even deeper into myself and into a state of trauma. The room was a vast chamber made of granite and stone, with great stone columns of ancient Greek and Roman style architecture all throughout the room, and reaching to the ceiling, which was at least 50 feet high. The space was rectangular in shape, and the doors that I had entered were at the far end of the room. There was a series of pools varying in size, with the smaller pools at the end I had entered and the larger pools at the other end of the room. There was an elevated level at the far end of the chamber opposite from where I had entered that was about 15 to 20 feet higher than the pools below. There was an open water slide leading from this upper level to the pools below. There was also a small waterfall cascading over the edge of the elevated area. The pools were filled with men, and they ranged in age as well as size. Some of them were skinny, and some of them were very heavy and fat. The older men were closest to the other end of the room where the slide and waterfall was located. The water in the pools was not clear and clean, but was blood red, and there was blood and gore all over the stone floors of the room. The entire scene was a horror to behold. I also asked my grandfather about the people who had been in the ceremony and why it was that the CIA would have any interest in such groups as this and not simply destroy them. He told me that the group I had been guarding was an old and satanic group that many had tried to destroy and abolish throughout history. He told me that this group had been around for thousands of years, and he said that each time they were hunted down, this occult group would go into hiding, and always some of them would survive and escape. He said that in this way, this occult group had continued throughout history, along with others like it. He said that the CIA and the Pentagon could seek out and attempt to destroy these occult groups, but he said that it would only make us enemies with them and push them even deeper into hiding. The members of this group were immensely powerful in the world stage, and my grandfather told me that it was better for the agency and the country if they worked with this group rather than try to destroy it, as by working with it, they were able to manipulate and blackmail its leaders and members in the direction the country and the world needed to go. He told me that there are other such cults in the world, and it is important to be aware of them and to keep control of them, as they are not going away and have been on the earth since the beginning of time.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel, as more Greentext will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.